Hello, welcome to this PPR Econ video on fiscal policy. First thing, define fiscal policy, please. Hopefully you remember that it's the use of government spending and taxation to control the macroeconomic performance of the economy. So next question is based on the specification. What is the purpose of a fiscal policy, please? Write down a few answers. So the main purpose of fiscal policy is to obviously control the macroeconomic performance of the economy. It's also to finance public services, it's to redistribute income and wealth, or it can also be obviously to correct market failures. Based on that then, what are, the other part of the spec here, what are the major areas of government expenditure and sources of revenue? They are historically always near enough the same three things for each. So see if you can identify them. Hopefully you've got social protection is the biggest area of government spending, and then health, and then education. And for revenue, we have got income tax, VAT, and national insurance contributions. Can you now please identify the two different types of expenditure the government might have, and on that could you try and define them? So hopefully you've had current expenditure is the day-to-day spending on providing public services, and that you have got capital expenditure, which is government spending on new public infrastructure and capital like schools and hospitals, etc. Taxes. Two types of taxes, please, with definitions. First one is direct taxes, so they are levied on the income or profits of the people who directly pay it, so they earn it and it comes directly out of that. And then you've got indirect taxes that are levied upon goods and services before they reach the customer, so they are indirectly placed upon consumers by either partly paid for or completely paid for by the business. On taxes, can you think of a diagram that would show the success a tax has on collecting revenue, please, or just success full stop? So hopefully you've identified the Laffer Curve. Now go ahead and draw it, please. So Laffer Curve, y-axis government revenue, x-axis tax rate. Very middle T-star is what's called the optimum tax rate. So initially as taxes rise, the assumption is that tax revenue will increase. But once you go beyond T-star, the Laffer Curve theory is that it creates disincentives, and maybe things like tax avoidance may start to creep in, and the government actually raise less revenue from higher rates of tax. So that's important to know about things like inequality and income tax. Budgets then. Can you identify the three types of budgets, please, and with them what they mean in regards to government spending and taxes? So hopefully you've got a budget deficit, a budget surplus, and a balanced budget. A budget deficit is whenever government spending is greater than taxes. A budget surplus is when government spending is less than taxes, and a balanced budget is when they are equal. Two theories or ideas about fiscal policy you need to be aware of. What type of fiscal policy is through with one-off changes to it, and what are meant by automatic stabilizers, please? So one-off changes to fiscal policy is what we call discretionary fiscal policy, and automatic stabilizers refer to how fiscal instruments change and react and influence the rate of growth and help counter swings in the economy. So based on that, cushion the fall diagram and the different budgets based on the economic cycle. If you can draw a diagram for that as well, please. So the first one is this diagram, which kind of shows different budgets based on, as you can see in the x-axis, GDP. So in low rates of growth at Y1, the assumption is, well, the budget deficit, that's also called the cyclical deficit, and it's the idea of automatic stabilizers, as government spending will be higher than taxes as the government step in and provide some support to individuals at times of a recession, and taxes will be low as we assume unemployment will increase, and people will lose jobs, and therefore income tax receipts fall. And Y3, more growth, more money raised on taxes as fiscal drag begins to occur and less government spending, which again is a budget surplus. So, and then you've also got the idea from that of cushion in the fall. So this is whenever the blue line, if there's no fiscal policy, booms and slumps will be much worse. However, this diagram represents how fiscal policy acts as an automatic stabilizer, as in the red line keeps the economy more in check. So it stops big booms and it stops large falls in the economy. As it says, as the fiscal instruments step in to influence what's happening in the economy. Specification asks you to know the difference between a structural and cyclical deficit. I'll kind of give you a few clues there, but see if you can define both. Structural, part of the deficit which is not related to the state of the economy. So it's sort of like when the economy is growing, you still have a deficit, so it's like sort of maybe overspending. Whereas a cyclical deficit occurs as part of the business cycle. So you can see there in the first diagram, the budget deficit, whenever GDP was low, was a cyclical deficit, because that's sort of what has to happen whenever the economy isn't doing too well. So what policies would be used, what fiscal policy I should say would be used during a recession, and what fiscal policy would be used during a boom? Hopefully you got recession, you would use expansionary fiscal policy, which is an increase in G, government spending, and a drop in taxes. And in a boom, you would use the opposite, which is called contractionary fiscal policy, which is a drop in government spending and a rise in taxes the other way around then to keep the economy in check and under control. Debt. Define debt and identify why it may be a concern. Please pause the video. So your definition for debt is the accumulation of borrowing resulting from running persistent budget deficits, and the issues are the fact that A, they're a burden on future generations, B, higher taxes have to be repaid, or maybe higher taxes to repay the debt, or you have to make cuts to repay the debt. It may lead to a lower credit rating, and therefore it's hard to finance future government spending, and there also may be financial crowding out. That could be monetary crowding out, so look that up as well, or financial crowding out. Solutions to debt. Pause the video, see if you can identify what could solve debt issues. Hopefully you've got the two main issues are either cut spending or increase taxes. The combination or use of them is normally called austerity measures, and that is reducing the deficit to run a surplus and hopefully repay the debt as introduced by the coalition government in 2010 to try and do such a thing. Positives and negatives then please of expansionary, I should say, fiscal policy. So what are the pros and what negatives might there be from it? Advantages first off, it boosts jobs and growth. Second, it's a kind of a multiplier effect. Particularly if you focus on consumption by cutting taxes, and there may because obviously consumption is the largest part of AD, so it would be a large consumption-led multiplier effect, and it may have an incentive effect on employment because obviously cutting taxes may incentivize more people to join the workforce, may even be a supply side repercussion of that. Disadvantages include an inflexible annual budget, which is obviously something that it only comes about once a year. It's hard to fine-tune the economy as well, so like these changes the government spending and taxes make it very hard for the government to react and adjust, and it can also be inflationary. So if you boost AD, if you think about an AD diagram, classical, that's obviously going to push up inflation, and it may also cause a balance of payments deficit. So that's obviously the assumption that as the economy grows, that means incomes rise, and as incomes rise, we've got a marginal propensity to import, and also as the economy grows, as the economy grows, we may export more from that, or export less from that, because as the economy grows, AD shifts outwards, pushes the price level up, may lead to less exports. Supply side policies. see if you can define them and draw the diagram, please. So hopefully you've got that diagram of an LRAS shifting outwards, and the aim to boost the productive potential of the economy. There are two types of supply side policies. See if you can identify them and explain their difference and examples of both, please. So hopefully you've got market-led supply side policies. They involve policies to increase competitiveness and free market efficiency. So that might be things like reducing trade union power, privatisation, and lowering income tax. So they're market-led, leaving things, the government stepping back and leaving it to the free market to have a boost to productivity and the more efficient market. And you've also got interventionist policies, intervening being the key word here. So that's whenever the government intervene to overcome market failures, e.g. higher government spending on transport, health, education. The key there is the government are intervening. They're like normally spending more money to boost the supply side of the economy. Finally, pros and cons of each, please. So obviously there's a lot of supply side policies. If you look at the diagram above, it achieves an increase in full employment, or obviously with that sustainable economic growth. There's a lower price level, which is obviously good for inflation, and it can boost exports, so reduce the balance payments deficit and bring benefits like that. Disadvantages include things like time, particularly interventionist policies. Healthcare, education take a lot of time to feed through the system and for the benefits in regards to the productive potential and full employment to be felt. Again, interventionist policies are expensive, so there's a large opportunity cost associated with them. And it's finally hard to gauge the success or effectiveness of such policies due to things like time and changes over time and ceteris paribus assumptions that can't be made. So that's everything to do with fiscal policy, debt and supply side policies. Screenshot that if you want. That's quite a lot of information there, and if you didn't answer all them questions correctly, go back through them and have another go at the video. Thank you very much.